Allie.
And I'm Dahlia.
And welcome to Navigate the Now. Today we have two guests, Bella and Zehra from Sunnyside Woodside Mutual Aid Group in Queens, otherwise known as SWAMA. And they will be sharing with us their journey into mutual aid and beyond. And Zehra will also be sharing with us her future endeavor known as Saat Saath, which is a mutual aid and art-centered third space currently in the works, which focuses on community support for the community and by the community.
Yes. Stay tuned. Enjoy the episode. And if you've been enjoying our content, please follow, like, and subscribe, and share, and turn on your notifications. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, everywhere you listen to your podcast. Alrighty.
And don't forget to reach out to us at Navigate the Now on Instagram, just as I said as our handle. And then we are also navigatethenow@gmail.com.
Enjoy the episode. Hello, y'all. Welcome to Navigate the Now. This is Dahlia.
Hello, and this is Allie.
Welcome back. Episode 6. Today we have our second guest. Two guests, actually, in the studio today, aka in my living room.
Yes.
You want to start us off, Allie?
Today we have Bella and Zehra. So welcome, Bella and Zehra. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and coming to Dahlia's apartment and meeting with us. We're so excited to hear about your work. And so Bella, your pronouns are she, her, and Bella was born and raised in the Bronx and has worked in an environmental nonprofit since high school and has lived in Queens since 2016 and joined the Sunnyside Woodside Mutual Aid in 2020. And Bella, you went vegetarian at 10. Go you. I've also been a vegetarian for a really long time. And went vegan during Trump's first presidency. And you like to spend time reading, taking subway naps, going on very, very, very long walks, going to the gym, and spending as much time as possible with friends.
I just want to say, you like living on the edge, taking subway naps.
I love taking subway naps.
Yeah, that is living on the edge.
That's a different type of napper right there.
It's so cozy. I took one on the way here.
And then we have Zehra with us as well. Pronouns she, they, is an active member of Sunnyside Woodside Mutual Aid, co-founder of Saat Saath, a future mutual aid and art-centered third space in Queens, New York. They prefer to spend their time baking, writing poetry, cuddling with their cat, Zebu, scheming with friends and fellow mutual aid group members, hosting community gatherings, communing with the universe, and overall imagining new ways of connecting. Thank you both for joining.
Yes. We can applause for sure.
Welcome both once again. We are going to go over our community agreements. So basically community agreements, I'm sure you guys are probably quite well aware of what they are, but for our listeners, we're agreeing on, as the four of us here, of how we're going to treat each other, how we're going to go through this conversation together. So the first one is speaking in draft does not have to be a polished thought. The second one, assume everyone is doing their best. Remember, most people have good intentions. 3, not here to be right, but to get it right. 4, be present, active listening. 5, be mindful of speaking space and how much time you're taking up. 6, this is space to learn and grow. 7, have fun. We're gonna go have a good time.
Yes.
It's so great.
You
I
like
love that
it?
you have community agreements on your show.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add? No pressure, but if there's anything else you want to add on to our agreements. Oh, first off, do you agree to our agreements?
I agree.
You agree?
Yes.
We got buy-in.
I think that's a really great list. One that I have seen on other community agreement lists is let's listen to understand versus listening to respond. I know we can all sense that when someone's just like waiting for us to stop talking so that they can just say something else.
Absolutely.
And I have full faith that nobody in this space would do that, but just that's one that I often like when it's included. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know I've been there for sure. So you got that down, Allie?
I wrote it down. Yeah. I can relate with that as well. I agree. Yeah. That's something I'm actually very actively always working on. So I love that. Yeah.
All right. So we're adding our 8th community agreement. All right. I met Zehra and Bella because I joined the Sunnyside Woodside Mutual Aid Group back in January. Yay. And I found out because somebody posted it on Instagram, and it was perfect timing with the new administration. I just felt the need to do something.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky to be living in a city, in a neighborhood that already has such a well-established mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
I say this many a time, I never knew what mutual aid was.
Yeah.
When I first heard about it and I joined, I met you both through Zoom. I think it was like a new member or maybe just like a hang or something.
Yeah.
It was,
The one after Trump won?
It was in January.
Yeah.
It was the first one in January.
Right, I remember it was just like a hang.
It was, I guess it was just a hang. Yeah. I joined, and I really liked the concept, and everybody was really cool and awesome.
Everyone is really cool.
Yeah, everybody is really cool. And so that's how that's my introduction to mutual aid and introduction to a friendship with Bella and Zehra. So today's podcast is going to be about what mutual aid is, what it isn't, and community spaces. So before we get into the nitty gritty of that, Bella, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Can you give us just a little bit of your story? What kind of shaped you, what motivated you, or what maybe geared you towards this type of involvement?
Yeah, totally. So I was like thinking about this in, what brought me to mutual aid. And I think, I was raised like a lot of people to think we need to make the world a better place. So I grew up volunteering a lot. I did the walks, I did the volunteer hours, the key clubs, all of it. And that was super important to me growing up. I went into environmental work back in high school because this is the way you could help the most people. Because, if you don't have clean water and air, you don't have anything. And then I think stuff for me started changing my senior year of college because I was the president of the LGBT club on campus. And there was a really terrible incident with a trans student on campus. And our community formed a response to that. And we actually got change on campus. We got gender neutral restrooms. We got a staff person who at that time was part-time, now full-time, dedicated helping LGBT staff on campus. So it felt like, you could do something. And at the same time, my senior year was 2015. So we were also organizing BLM protests and rallies on campus. And I went to a small school. They didn't really make the news. It's not really the scale of what you see now, obviously. But it very much felt like, we could be a part of something larger in this larger movement. And I graduated with this momentum. And at the same time, this third thing came into play where I was unlearning a lot of Zionism I grew up with. And so I decided not to go on birthright. Around my senior year, I was deciding if I wanted to study abroad or do a gap year post-college in Israel. And I decided not to. And so all of this, I moved back home to the Bronx. And I don't know where to channel this energy and this newfound understanding that it's not so much that people need help individually, but that there's awful systems at play, and seeing all these politicians who I believed in, who may be great people with great ideas, let us down because the system is really, really bad. And I didn't know what to do with this, so I spent all the years past college trying to volunteer everywhere I could, trying to figure out what my role is, and I joined a bunch of groups, and I didn't stick with any of them. Some of them were great and just far from my house, and I was like, this is not sustainable. And then I guess this is the shorter answer is in the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, I lost my job like a lot of people. And I was living in Queens in the epicenter of it and feeling all this despair and sadness and not knowing what to do. So I started volunteering with this other nonprofit to deliver food to people. And I think they did great work, but it felt to me like something still wasn't clicking. And then around the same time, I saw a message in one of those chats, and then I saw a flyer for a mutual aid group. And I forget the exact language, but I was like, this feels better to me. It feels like it might be challenging a system. It might be working outside the system. And I joined pretty early on. I wasn't a founding member, but I joined early on, and I really feel like I found my people, and I found that working outside the system to try and make this change and challenge these awful systems was the work I wanted to spend my time doing. That's awesome. You're awesome.
I love learning the story about you.
It's always a journey. It's always a story, right? Of how to get to mutual aid. So
how'd you get here?
Yeah, how do you get there? Zehra?
I guess similar to Bella, like I grew up volunteering, having a strong sense of like wanting to be a part of justice making systems and groups of people. So yeah, I was always sort of like volunteering with different things or involved in different things through high school, middle school, high school, college. And then on account of that, I was like, maybe I should go to law school. I'm interested in doing social justice work. And maybe that would be like that seems like the way that you implement change, according to that limited worldview I had back then, and also having pretty traditionally Indian parents that want me to go to law school. So I ended up in law school, and I loved being around. I went to CUNY Law School, and CUNY is sort of known for being sort of a social justice sort of activated university system. And so I'm really grateful that I ended up there, and I feel like that was a lot of my radicalizing as well, and that I was learning a lot through my peers, honestly, more than, I mean, through classes as well, but I feel like largely I was learning through my peers about different injustices and different ways of being in the world and different perspectives, etc. And so I left law school feeling like, okay, I'm not really sure I actually want to practice law. It didn't seem like it really fit who I was. I felt constantly through law school I was like swimming upstream, that it like didn't really like match who I was as a person and like what my strengths were. But I loved learning about this stuff and thinking about ways of challenging these inequitable systems that we live and are part of. So I practiced law very briefly, and then I was like, this really isn't for me. Now there are like clients involved. There are other lives at stake, and I really don't actually want to be doing this work. And so I extricated myself from that, and then I did something very different for a few years. I baked professionally, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. And then eventually my career path kind of took a different turn. But when I moved to Sunnyside in 2021, is shortly after I moved here is when I found out about Sunnyside Woodside Mutual Aid. And at that time, I was just looking for, something to give back to my community. I, like you, Dahlia, I actually had no sense of what mutual aid was. And I was involved with SWIMA for like a couple months at least before I really started developing an understanding of what mutual aid even was. I was showing up at the food distributions from time to time, but I didn't have a sense of, what made a mutual aid group different from other types of food distribution or volunteer organizations either. And it was only after like sort of meeting other folks that I've been able to sort of develop my own understanding of mutual aid as well, which I know we're going to get into. But just relating it back to, kind of my feelings about law school, I think like one of the things I really struggled with was being a part of systems and like feeling that I was still engaged and sort of complicit in sort of different hierarchies and enabling certain systems through my work if I were to be practicing law. And this is not to, this is no shade on folks who operate in those systems. Right. I want to be clear about that. I have a lot of colleagues and peers, and I have a lot of respect for them for being able to navigate those systems, and we need to continue doing that, as during these times. But I just felt, again, it wasn't for me. It was one of the things that was making me really uncomfortable was that hierarchy, and I love that mutual aid is very non-hierarchical and that everyone has something to give and something that they need. So I'll stop there. I think I've been blabbing for a while.
Yeah, that was a great story.
Thank you.
Just goes to show, there is no one way, one path to
exactly
to mutual aid,
yeah,
right, to this type of work.
Yeah.
So I do want to read a sentence from the mutual aid book from Dean Spade. We'll link below the book. But it's building solidarity during crisis and the next. And so one of the things that he says is mutual aid is the radical act of caring for each other while working to change the world. So Bella, can you talk to us a little bit about what is mutual aid? We've been saying this word left and right. We know it's not volunteer work.
Totally.
What is it?
Well, I always fall in the trap of defining it by what it's not, which I know you're not super supposed to do, but for me it really helps to, because we all understand this concept of charity, right? And it's not that. Like, we understand in charity, you go somewhere, you help the needy, quote unquote the needy, you do a service, you're the savior, you're helping save these people from whatever they're dealing with, or these dogs or whatever you volunteer with. mutual aid is it's not the opposite, but it's different in that it operates from a framework of it's non-hierarchical, as Zehra mentioned. We're all equal. We all have something to give. We all have something we need when we engage in these spaces and offer things and take things. We're all on equal ground. Mutual aid works outside of existing systems. It's political in that it's a movement to make the world a better place. It's not political in the traditional sense of the two-party system we have or any government that we have, but it stands for something, and it stands for like a better world than we are currently being offered, and working towards that and working with each other to build that.
So I really like that idea, and that's what really drew me to mutual aid, was the concept of we're helping one another out, and that if we want better, we need to seek better, right? And we can find it within ourselves. I've just started to read this mutual aid group. Shout out to Chelsea. She's the one that gave it to me. Chelsea is also with SWAMA. And in this book, it explains how a lot of times there's a not-for-profit, there's a volunteer work, and they really look at it almost as an elitist viewpoint, where you have to be a specialist to be able to help one another. Like the idea of only people with degrees, only people that have these certain specialties that can come in and help the community. And that is not what mutual aid is. Mutual aid is the people who are impacted the most know the solution, right? There's a line in the book that says real change comes from movements made of millions of ordinary people. And so that really speaks to me as well, that you don't have to be a superstar, right? You don't have to be somebody who has a million degrees behind your name. Just being human already gives you the power, the knowledge, the ancestral medicine to move forward and create the space in the world that we want to live in. Right? So that being said, Bella, going back to you, I know that you said you're not one of the founding members, but being part of the starting, can you explain a little bit how that looked like? I'm sure it's not easy. Like this all sounds amazing in text, but it's not easy to get people to kind of get out of their mind of how to help.
Well, so I was trying to find the flyer on my phone, but I couldn't at this point. It was so long ago. But so this mutual aid group has taken a lot of different shapes throughout the year, and definitely the most amount of people we had, and the most resources we had was in 2020 at the start of this pandemic. And there was just a lot of people. It took us so long to build the structures we had, and we had worked together. We had meetings often. One thing we were doing that we no longer do is, as it was unsafe for people to go outside and go into spaces, people would request food and we would deliver food to them. This is kind of a silly story, but as mentioned, I hadn't eaten meat. Since I was 10, so I've never really interacted with meat. And I also grew up mostly eating kosher, or only eating kosher. And I got a request for halal meat, and I went shopping, and I was like, wait, I don't know how to purchase this. So I was on FaceTime with a friend. I'm like, what about this? And they're like, that's green. We don't buy that. Find a meat that looks healthy. So you learn a lot. But so yes, we had people doing food deliveries. We had a community member still involved start the food pantry model we have now, where they cooked some meals and brought them out to the neighborhood, started announcing it. We then built out 2 other pantries, so we used to have 3 pantries. We had so much going on. We had a hygiene drives. We used to cook for the pantries, which we no longer do. We were working with community gardens that started popping up. I was involved with the start of one of the local community gardens that Guerrilla started in that time. There was just a lot going on, and I think a lot of that was just that we were unemployed, people had time and capacity. Even if you had a job, you couldn't go to a bar with your friends and hang out. It felt like the limited social time you would spend with people was mass doing mutual aid, caring for each other, figuring out what to do. And we were all kind of in it together, figuring out what to do. The book that you mentioned, Dean Spade came up with it as the pandemic was coming out. When that came out, we're like, yes, some kind of guideline and help. But yeah, the start of it was just really robust. It was a lot. It was a lot of people. It was a different time. And it was a lot of us all figuring out what this could look like together.
Well, my next question will go to Zehra. How long have you been with mutual aid now?
That's a good question. Maybe like 2.5 years.
2.5
maybe.
years.
Yeah.
That's a good amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
How has it been being part of this group and dealing with so many different personalities? Because once again, you know, this isn't a hierarchical, right?
Yeah.
It's not one person leading the group. How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it's well, one, it's a work in progress for sure. At the beginning of this year, as you were mentioning, as part of the time period that you started, we've had so many new members. So I think like we're still constantly sort of figuring that out, and it seems like it's shifted even from the start. There were a lot of people, and then there were less people, and now there, you know, it's gone up and down. One of the new member orientations, one of our other SWIMO members, Masha, had mentioned the biggest thing that we're doing as a mutual aid group is actually just kind of learning to work with each other and like creating this group of people that can trust each other and figure out a new way of sort of like engaging in the world. And I loved when she said that, because I hadn't really thought about that. I had been thinking a lot about the mutual aid group and like our work as like the food pantries or other sort of like, you know, tangible things, but then thinking about it as in that way kind of shifted it for me of like, okay, actually the way that we're trying to relate to each other interpersonally is the work itself too, you know? And so I think about that a lot. And, you know, I'm also thinking about what you guys have talked about on previous podcast episodes about like, you know, we have things that are so different about us, identity wise, maybe like values wise, etc. But our work is to try to find ways of still connecting and being able to work on the things that we care about despite those differences, and being able to sort of build a robust network regardless, you know? And I think that can be really hard. That's like, I think, and I'm so curious, Bella, about how this looked like earlier in the pandemic when there was less time for face-to-face contact, because I feel like that makes such a difference in terms of being able to be like, oh, this person is not just somebody I'm working with, but now we're friends. And so having that bond of friendship, I think often makes it easier to work with one another as well. But yeah, I think thinking about it in that way helped me sort of reframe potential conflict as an opportunity to actually like increase the value of the work we're doing itself, sort of, you know?
Really bring it back to basics and communication.
Yeah.
Can I say that it makes me think of, it's a common quote you hear, everybody wants a revolution, but nobody wants to do the dishes, right? And it's that insinuation of we want to do these great things, but really at the end of the day, these really small things are what allows you to do the other things, and they're often overlooked. And you can't do those things without these really minor kind of
Totally. Yeah, and I haven't read this yet, Bella, maybe you have, but to give a plug to Dean Spade's new Love in a Fucked Up World. And this actually, I think what he's writing about in that book is that, you know, there's so many interpersonal struggles that often end up being kind of like the death of different mutual aid groups or other sort of organizing groups, and how it's so important that we're able to work through conflict and find ways of actually addressing these things, and then not getting back to the work, but that this is the work itself, as well as like how we figure out and how we navigate conflict together. So I'm really looking forward to reading that book, but I haven't yet.
Knowing that we have listeners now, kind of what in a paragraph in its essence, for somebody who's maybe never even heard the term mutual aid, what is mutual aid? And like I hear what you're saying of different things you did, things that you do, but maybe some examples of what you do and how it looks.
Yeah, I think one good example of the way we do mutual aid, and two, the thing is, we all exist in this society together, this like very white supremacist, very hierarchical, very transphobic, very all the things society. So obviously that creeps into our work, and we always have to be checking how that creeps into what we do. So even like a food pantry model in itself can be super charity. It can look like charity, can be charity. So one way we have things a little different is that we have folks online who like traditionally get what they get, and like then they leave the line. We have people who both get food from the line and then go around the table and help give food out. And like multiple people at both our pantries will do that. And everyone online is a member in the same way we're members. We've had meetings where we try to engage members from the line in different capacities. There's a lot of language barriers with, like, there's just so many languages in Queens, it's be impossible for one person to speak them all. And if you do speak all those languages, please join our group, please, we need you. But we've come out with, like, solutions of, so we've taken polls throughout the years of what do you want to see at the pantry, because we don't want to be top down, like, deciding this is the food that we've decided you eat. There's so many cultures. So we will print out, like, a poster and have photos of different food and have it in different languages and be like, okay, so what food would you like to see? So that's ways we've tried to work against this charity model, and that we, 5 years later, I don't think we've perfected not making them charity based, but at the same time we've fed a lot of people and worked together towards that. And I think, some of the folks at our pantries go to other more traditional food pantries, and, like, there is a difference there. And I think that's just one example of how we mutual aid it.
Yeah. I think to highlight there too is, we're bringing the food, and I really like to highlight what you said about asking the community, what foods do you want here? What foods are you cooking in your home? And it is really difficult when you have so many people. I mean, I went for the first time a few weeks ago, and I speak Spanish and I speak English, obviously, because I'm speaking English. And, like, I don't even know how many languages we're speaking there. So it was communicating through just, like, body language. But that's just how it's done. I also want to read from the book the 3 key elements of what mutual aid is. So element 1, mutual aid projects work to meet survival needs and build shared understanding about why people do not have what they need. So that kind of ties into, like, the food and meeting people where they're at. 2, mutual aid projects mobilize people, expand solidarity, and build movements. So one of the things that Dean Spade says is it's solidarity, not charity. 3, mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors. So those are the 3 key elements. And I also want to say, and I know he also mentions it in his book, that this isn't a new way of living. This is almost like going back to the basic ways of living. Our ancestors probably lived, right? Before colonialism. So it's just, I feel like that's a trend that I've been seeing a lot. At least a lesson that I've been learning a lot this year is that it's so crucial to have the basics and foundations set.
I can give another example to your question, Ali, of, like, something that SWIMA is doing that represents sort of mutual aid work. We also have a Skillshare and community education group within SWIMA, and that relates to what Dahlia was saying earlier of, like, nonprofits can be very, like, you need to be a specialist in order to do something. But here our philosophy is that, like, we have a wealth of information and knowledge within our own community. And how can we find ways of sharing that knowledge with each other? And so, the Skillshare recently organized something about, like, how to get your prescription medications for less money. We're in the process of organizing a number of other ones. Again, sort of just breaking the binaries. Like, I love that, Bella, you mentioned that people online are also members. There's just, we're everything, we are both repositories of a lot of knowledge that we can share with others. There are a lot of things that we need to know about. There are things that we might need food-wise or security-wise, etc. And we all have gifts that we can give each other. So just finding ways of, like, really taking that philosophy and then, like, actualizing it through projects, I would say, is a lot of what mutual aid means to me.
Well put.
Here, here.
And I also want to add to that is there's been a few events that I've been to, webinars that I've also attended that I wouldn't have known of if I wasn't part of this group. So I actually went to, like, a Know Your Rights training through the NYC Watch, Ice Watch. NYC Ice Watch, and if it wasn't for somebody posting it, then I wouldn't have known. So it's the sharing, the skill share, the knowledge share, and connecting. So amazing, all good stuff. Something that I found really interesting, that I forgot who said it before, but not working with politicians. Bella, I think you may have mentioned it, maybe in one of our... I've helped Bella co-lead the monthly new member orientation. So I'm just there, just a yapper. It's really Bella.
You do a lot.
I gave my story about how I didn't know what mutual aid was until now.
You're underselling yourself.
So, but and I think it was the last time you mentioned how AOC, when this first started, when SWAMA first started, AOC reached out.
Yes.
And wanted to, I think, donate. And then it started the conversation of, are we endorsing? What are we doing with politicians?
So she reached out she offered us money essentially, but for us to accept that money, we would have had to become a nonprofit, which we are not a nonprofit. And they're like other mutual aid groups that navigated this in different ways. Some of them partially became a nonprofit that supports a mutual aid wing. There's different ways to do this, and we decided, and this was a long email chain back and forth where we all thought through this collectively. It was city council elections around the first year of SWIMA being a thing, and we dealt with a lot at once around the time city council started running, where we had, I'm not gonna name names, but we had one city council member who was running who would show up, sign up for shifts, take a photo, and leave. And we were like, well, you can't do that. If you signed up for a shift, we need you here. You know, mutual aid operates in different ways. At a nonprofit, you might abandon your shift. Things might go on here. We need you here, but also, like, we're all friends. You're letting your friends down. So this politician would show up for a photo op, bail, leave us in the lurch. We had another city council candidate who would show up to our food pantries with branded, I forget if it was masks or hat, probably both, with their campaign on it. And it looked like it was their pantries, which, you know, it's our pantries. It's like the people's pantries. It is not this politician's pantries. And then we also had a candidate who, and they were right, they like helped start the food pantries. They did a lot. They were very involved, and they don't like tout this on their platform. But when asked about what community work, they mentioned it, and we're like, it was really complicated to navigate. We had a long meeting. We had a lot of messages, and we came up with a policy of not working with electeds directly. We don't do that because we don't want to endorse as SWIMA. As individuals, obviously, do your thing.
Vote for whoever you want to vote for.
Yes, like, we are a bunch of people with different ideology, political opinions. We want to be that. We don't want to be just all the same framework and our viewpoints and never challenge each other. But we came up with this, and I think that was like one of the big hurdles we jumped through together was figuring out, do we want to become a nonprofit? Do we want to work with electeds? There's a lot of perks to working with electeds, right? Like, that's why nonprofits do, that's why some community groups do it. So just working through this all together was very interesting and hard and complicated. Now we have a policy of, you know, we sometimes have very innocuous, very sweet invitations from city council folks or like other offices being like, come to this event, do this. And we're like, no, if folks from our community want to, great. But we do not want any politician to be able to say this mutual aid group endorses us, because that's not what we do.
I think that's really important that you mentioned that different mutual aid groups are going to do different things, right? Whatever suits them. So, like, no shade if somebody did that or whatever, but the fact that SWAMA came together and agreed that this is how we were going to move forward, I thought that was really cool and interesting.
Yeah. And I think it also shows another aspect of mutual aid, which is consensus is super important versus like a nonprofit model or a corporate model where it's like there's somebody at the top that is making the critical decisions on behalf of the larger group, and there's this weird understanding that somehow they know what's best for everybody. But in a mutual aid group, it's like, no, everybody has a stake in this, everybody has a legitimate opinion, and it's up to us to figure out how to come together and like figure out what's best for our group and our specific needs.
That's awesome.
And mutual aid group, become friends, supporting each other in our projects, different side projects.
That's the best. That's the best little.
It's just a little segue. Zehra, we are going to shift gears a little bit. Okay. And I would love to hear if you could expand a little bit more of your reimagining what third spaces can look like, and speak about Saat Saath. Please correct me if I'm mispronouncing
Sure, Saat Saath. It's a little bit tough for the non-South Asian speaker to say, admittedly. But yeah, so thank you, Dahlia, for inviting me to talk about this. Saat Saath is a project that I'm working on with my friend, Rafa Rodriguez, who of course you know from our yoga studio. He's also a co-founder of our yoga studio. And we are hoping to create a third space that is really mutual aid centered as well as art centered. And a third space, for those who are encountering this term for the first time, is just a space where people can hang out, with the idea that first and second spaces are home and work. And those are, really kind of the two spaces that we can most legitimately kind of exist in, but we need third spaces, other places that we can hang out with each other, that we can connect with each other, that we can build our friendships, that we can build our mutual aid groups, etc. And I think it is very intentional that there are very few third spaces where we can do that right now. I feel like it is the architecture of capitalism is to increase our isolation from one another. And so having spaces where we can exist, that we can be who we are, that we can feel like we have a sense of belonging and that we can work on things together, is something that I feel and Rock feels and so many of us feel is really necessary in this time, as we have so many challenges that we need to find solutions to and find creative ways of navigating through at this moment. And so we're hoping that Saat Saath can be a home for a lot of that activity, a lot of getting people together and being like, oh, you're interested in this, I'm interested in this, why don't we work on this together? And a phrase that I really like that comes from abolitionist Miriam Keba is like, it's going to take 1,000,000 tiny experiments in order to figure out like what the new world is going to be and how we create it, what it looks like. And so this is Saat Saath itself is a tiny experiment, and we're hoping it's the home to many other tiny experiments.
That's lovely.
Yeah, it is very lovely. Tiny experiences of ordinary people coming together.
Yeah.
Doing extraordinary things.
I'm gonna say it's so interesting because we are primed to think that there are a lot of third spaces. To the untrained eye, it's almost like a mirage, like, oh, there's a lot of third spaces, right? But so many of what we think of third spaces are transactional.
Yeah.
And require some kind of transaction, some kind of payment, whether you're at a bar or any kind of, even I think of often as fitness. I mean, shout out, like even me, I love my yoga studio and I did teacher training as well. But so often, how many spaces are there now for people that don't require spending money? I think is important to think about. So that's kind of helped me reframe my thoughts. But
yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Ali. For sure, it can be really cost prohibitive to be outside in the world. And I will say, like, you will probably have to spend some amount of money at Saat Saath so that we can stay open.
Yeah.
Totally devoid of that model either, unfortunately, for the time being. That'll be part of our experimentation, is figuring out, okay, how do we beef, and I think that's what's fun about working on this project with Rock, is like we are trying to think through like how do we create something that's financially like solvent, but can mostly be a place where people are spending little to no money. So that's definitely part of the experiment that we're working on, is how do we do that. But yeah, especially living in New York City, there's so many memes that people will always post about, like, as soon as you lose your house, it's like $100, please.
How does it happen?
And I think that's part of why I mentioned I have a professional baking background. And we're going to be selling baked goods at Saat Saath. And that's honestly, part of my thinking is that, like, it can be really expensive to get a meal together oftentimes, but if you somewhere get some coffee or just get a cookie or something, that's a way smaller ask on somebody's wallet in order to exist in public with somebody else, So that's part of the experiment we're thinking through.
And especially like versus giving, like, a business that's trying to make as much money as possible is going to be different. You know what I mean? Like, that's you have to pay rent, of course. So
yeah, for sure. And I think it's also thinking we vote with our money too, like where our money goes, where our resources are going to go to. So taking these spaces, these third spaces that are intentional. Right? So it's different. Like what you were, tying back to what you were saying, Ali. There's the idea of like there's so many third spaces, but it's more focused on revenue, making money.
Yeah.
And then this is just more intentional
Yeah.
space of
Yeah.
connecting.
Yeah.
And spending some money, but
For
feels different. Right?
Yeah, no,
Well,
I
you
think
do.
that's
You have to stay open. So, you know.
The water bill.
some
Or the light
someone's
bill.
gonna have to pay for
All
now, you know. But yeah, that's absolutely right. I think that what we're hoping really distinguishes us is that intention. That there are a lot of places, like Ali mentioned, that like to the untrained eye like may look like a third space, but like there's nothing that business unfortunately is really doing on their own in order to promote people coming together or having different sort of points of connection. And so that's, I think, what hopefully is really going to distinguish us. Like through the pop-ups that we've hosted so far, there's always been a community sort of art component. For the pop-up that we hosted yesterday, we had a write a note, take a note, our activity where community members were encouraged to write just a note of comfort or encouragement or solidarity to a neighbor, and then take one that somebody else had written. So
it was really cute. I have mine hanging on my refrigerator.
Oh, cute.
And then I wrote a note, and I was like, if you guys want to listen to an awesome podcast, listen to Navigate the Now.
Yes, I'm so glad you wrote that.
Can you explain to us what are some other events that you put together?
Yeah.
Actually, the one that I'm specifically thinking about is the one that you did with Father Carl.
Oh, sure, yeah. So we hosted a community iftar. I guess that was in what month?
Iftar,
now? Yeah, in March. And for folks who are not familiar with the term iftar, so during the Islamic month of Ramadan, when a lot of Muslims are fasting, the meal that you eat at the end of the day after sundown is called iftar. And so we hosted a community iftar that was open to the general public, to all of the neighbors in Sunnyside and Woodside, etc. Just as a way of just coming together, like that sort of age-old concept of breaking bread together is so like sort of potent for a reason, that there is something that's that fosters such deep connection of just existing together and sharing food together. And so it was a potluck, which made it even more special because folks were bringing things that represented their culture or their background or things that they really enjoyed eating, and being able to sit together and be like, oh, this is so good, tell me about how you made this, or and someone was like, oh, this is my grandma's recipe from Puerto Rico or something like that. So there was just a lot of beautiful moments in the course of that evening, and I think that's the one example of the types of events that and spaces we're hoping to create with Saat Saath.
So the idea of also like collaborating with others.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, not just doing it alone, but everything good and everything great happens in solidarity and in collaboration, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it was a potluck style, bring your own dish. What things did you do specifically during the event to make it more communal, more intentional?
So we had different prompts that we'd put up across the space to sort of invite a conversation between neighbors. So, it can traditionally be a little bit hard to show up in a space and just make friends or chat with others. And feel free to, you were both there, so please chime into your experience as to whether this was effective or not. But Father Carl and I should mention Father Carl he leads the Episcopal Church here in Sunnyside, and he's a neighbor and friend of mine. So we thought through maybe different things different prompts to sort of invite conversation between folks if they want to chat and they're not really sure what to chat about. And they were kind of related to the theme of the iftar and of different sort of traditions folks may have, or different ways of sort of connecting with spirituality that they may have, etc. I don't know if either of you used those prompts that evening or what you thought about them. We were hoping that would be one way of sort of inviting folks to connect with somebody new.
So I definitely use the prompts, but I just want to say in the spirit of mutual aid, I've known Zehra now a year and a half, and it's so great to see because there's so much love Zehra. I could do my own podcast listing things I love about Zehra, but I think a thing that you give, we all have something we need, we all have something to give, and what you give is you are so thoughtful and you create such beautiful spaces. Everything you're talking about here, it's so beautiful to see that this is the route you're going to take moving forward. Zehra and I met at an event thrown at their house that was just really helped me stay sane, and during a really hard time that it was right after October 7th, and we were all looking to connect and be like, what can we do, and also sit with all the heaviness. And I met Zehra at their house at this event. I was a total stranger, a friend of a friend, and that was the first time I met Zehra, and I've never left an event thrown by them that I hadn't left with like my new favorite person, with someone who isn't like
Aw.
incredible and delightful. So I do think, in the spirit of mutual aid, it is so cool to see you do this. And also, Sarah's just an incredible baker. But it is, yeah, their ability to intentionally make a space where people feel supported. And I've never left, like, my heart always feels so full after, and I'm like, oh, the world is a great place. Like, everything might suck, but I've connected with all these beautiful people who might be different from me or might be the same as me, and we all will work together to make things right. So just wanted to, like, I'm very proud and excited for you.
Thank you, Bella. Can I give you a hug? That's so sweet. Thank you.
I love you.
I love you
It's so true. It's so true. And like Zehra, I met Father Carl, and he's actually coming on. So we're gonna be interviewing. Yeah. So just another, side effect.
Yeah.
Of the mutual aid and being in community with people is meeting other people.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to hear that. He's going to be a great
Yes,
guest.
I'm super excited to have him on.
That's so great. I can't wait to listen to that episode that doesn't exist yet.
It's coming. It's coming. Well, Bella, I just want to thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
It was
Thank you,
a wonderful
guys. Thank
conversation.
you.
I knew this was going to be a great conversation. When Allie and I were first thinking about this podcast and thinking like making politics relatable, everything's political.
Everything's political.
Everything's political.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to have an episode specifically on mutual aid.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted you both to be on. So thank you for saying yes.
The easiest yes to give.
This was fun.
This is our first podcast.
Podcast. And so as we wrap up, one of the things that we talk about on Navigate the Now is our toolbox, right? There's not just one single solution. Everybody's different, how they manage politics, how they manage their life. From your experience with mutual aid, creating third spaces, your life experience, what are some lessons or tools that you would give our listeners? And
Well, the initial one that comes to my mind, and okay, I was born and raised in New York City. I do not leave very often, so some of my advice might be centered around very urban environments, but like flyering really is a way more accessible way of doing things than just posting on Instagram. Flyering is more labor intensive, but it really, I think, is a tool that people forget about often. Every time we flyer, we have new members, we have more people coming to the pantries, we have more people engaged. I think in general, like if you're trying to start a mutual aid group, if you're just looking for like-minded people, if you want to be like, hey, who wants to read this book and learn about politics together, and you like don't know where to start, you're new in town, you just don't know like-minded folks wherever you are. I think it's a really good tool to be like, hey, do y'all want to read emergent strategies together? Like, I think, yeah.
that's a great way to put yourself out there.
Yeah, community boards, like grocery stores often have community, like just trying to think
That's
of
a good one.
tools.
That's a very good tangible one.
Yeah.
I've already said some version of this already earlier, but I think when we're faced with so many challenges, and it can feel so overwhelming, and it can feel really easy to just fall into despair and hopelessness and be like, well, everything sucks and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think one thing I would remind you is that we genuinely can all do something. Oftentimes making change is as simple as just connecting with a friend and being like, hey, do you want to do this thing together? And I think like organizing maybe can feel really serious, but it's actually it is a lot of just like, let's fuck around and find out with friends, you know? Like just hang out with your friends and do something. And I think like that also just has the opportunity to strengthen your friendships, you know? That not only are we doing something that's potentially helping someone outside of ourselves, but we also have an opportunity to like just deepen our relationships with each other and what the purpose of our friendship is. So yeah, it's easy to fall into despair, but like just do things with your friends, you know?
Yeah. And on a similar note, that's like kind of maybe a tool. And not to keep talking about Dean Spade, but he's gonna listen to this. Obviously, we're obsessed. Which, like,
We're gonna tag him.
But I went to the book talk of his most recent book launched here, and he kept talking about this thing I've been thinking a lot about is like the left's version. We love to cancel each other. We love to be like, this person is an imperfect activist. This person did this thing and this thing, and very likely they did, right? Like we're imperfect people. None of us. We're all new to this. We live in this society that is so capitalist, that is so white supremacist. All our thinking is shaped by this. We're gonna say fucked up shit. Sorry to curse. We're gonna say bad stuff. We're gonna say things that are not correct, and I don't think that's necessarily acceptable. Like if someone says something ableist, we should be able to be like, that thing you said was not okay for this reason. However, I've seen a lot of public call outs. If we're like talking abolition, we need to understand that people can and will be better if we allow them to and help guide them to. And I think that's what the right does right is, you know, you see all these people on the right who you're like, these people are clearly not speaking for you. What are you doing there? But they don't care about your identity as long as you agree with them. They do not care what you say outside of this thing as long as you agree with them. So I think we need to allow each other grace and growing and like be like, hey, I actually don't love 90% of what they think, but this 10%, let's bond on that. Let's work on that. Let's get there together because it's kept the left stuck for so long. So whatever tool is, maybe forgiveness, maybe care, maybe carefully calling people out, that, and allowing people grace, because like no one's perfect.
I love that. And there's so much I could say about that.
I was gonna say I can really jump on that as well, and I 1,000% agree with that. And it goes back to, I'm gonna link it back to the community agreement that can help of assuming everyone is doing their best. And that people have good intentions, and that that's something maybe they, and so when you think of like, maybe somebody does say something but they didn't know better, but in general they have the best intentions, and if you let them know that that's hurtful, they'll hopefully say, oh, okay, and accept, alter, and move on. So, but people are worthy of redemption.
Exactly.
We gotta be in this new future.
And then if there's anybody who's listening and they want to reach out and they want to know how to start mutual aid on their end, if they want to know how to support Saat Saath, where can they reach out to either one or both? Or
well, if you're like trying to reach me directly, you're like, I want to talk to her. I run the mutual aid group's Instagram because I have a crippling Instagram addiction, and I've decided that's something I can give, and there is need for that. So I spend time on our Instagram page, which is swma.nyc. And if you're in the neighborhood or just excited about joining, you could go to swma.nyc as a website and sign up. You'll get our newsletter, which is beautiful and awesome and gorgeous and really informative. And you could sign on to our Slack, which is where we do our organizing. You'll get added to our Notion, which is kind of our website where you could see our meeting notes. You could learn more about us. So if you're ready to join SWMA, we want you. We have new member orientation coming up, usually every first Friday of the month, followed by a happy hour.
And we have members from all around the city, not just even in Queens. So if you're interested and willing to come here, then we'd love to have you. And if you'd like to follow Saat Saath, you can find us on Instagram. It's at saat.saath at Instagram. And then we also, in our bio, you can find a link to sign up for our newsletter if you'd like.
I say we will link all the mentioned Instagrams below and websites. So for anybody listening, they don't have to write it down.
And for our listeners who are out of state, if mutual aid is something you're interested in, we're going to link the mutual aid book below from Dean Spade. If you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to SWAMA, Sunnyside, Woodside Mutual Aid, just to pick Bella's brain.
And if you live somewhere else and you're like, I need help finding a mutual aid group, we have some connection. Or like, we're not experts, we could try to help you start one. I don't know. We could have that convo. We could help you design a flyer. Like, we'll chat, let's yap.
Let's chat.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, if you stayed until all the way to the end, we appreciate it. 100%, 1,000%. Hopefully you took something from this incredible conversation from these two incredible women.
And thank you, Zehra, so much.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Dahlia. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us on and hosting us in your beautiful house with
Yeah,
your
you're
adorable
welcome.
cats.
Yes.
Oh my God, thank you. So thank you again, Bella and Zehra. And if you like our content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We are at Navigate the Now on Instagram and Navigate the Now at Gmail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Yay.